All right, good evening. Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi in honor of the upcoming marriage of their daughter, Ilana Joy Brescher of Los Angeles, tomorrow night. That's the real thing happening. Okay, it's really happening. Here we go. Benos Shuach, 8 lines down, 2 dots. Benos Shuach, the things that there were that we learned that you're not allowed to sell to non-Jews because they're using them for idolatrous purposes. One is benos shuach. Amar Rabba bar Chana. Rabbi Chana says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Te'ini chiva rosa. These are white figs. They're white because I guess they took a long time to ripen. Does it take 3 years, like a 3-year cycle for them to grow, and then it would be in the future years? I don't know what kind of dates they are, but yes, those are those. And then we've got pitutros, the next kind of thing are pitutros. The Gemara wants to know what are those. So Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, I'm not going to say it. Betotros sehen shanu. We're talking about that these are the itzteroblin that we had talked about earlier, but they have their stems attached to them. They're itzteroblin and their figs, the stems that are attached to them as well. Then we have levona, is the frankincense. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Yitzchak said the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Levona zacha. Levona is a special type. It's this like pure levona that was used that they would use for their incense purposes. It's also an ingredient in ketores. Tana, we learned umikula and mochrin lehen chavila. Right, so you can sell the Mishnah that we learned that you can sell a bundle of it, right? Because they're not, if you're selling it by the bundle, so then you're presuming you're selling it to somebody who's going to then resell amounts of it. They're not using it themselves for idolatry. So v'kama chavila, how much is a bundle? What does that mean when you say a bunch of it, right? What is a bunch? A bundle sounds like nondescript terminology. So Perush Rabbi Yehuda ben Basir explains, ein chavila pechusa mishlosha monin, all right? It's a bundle is at least 3 moneh, right? 3 moneh is a large quantity, and I didn't look up exactly how large that works out for. Usually money, I guess like 100 is like a value, right? I think it's a value.
It's the weight of 100 zuz.
Right, so it's a monetary value, 100 zuz, the weight of 100 zuz. So I guess it's a weight, right? The equivalent, or I thought it was the monetary value of 100 zuz, but okay. But in any event, right, there's an equivalent of 100. So the question is, okay, so if the point is that you're trying to prevent somebody from serving idolatry with it, so what they'll do is you're now selling it to somebody who's clearly a reseller. They're going to go and open the Avodah Zara shop, right? And the Avodah Zara shop is going to sell to other people who are going to worship Avodah Zara.
It's actually 1.25 pounds, which is 57 kilos.
There you go, 1.2. That's a good amount. Thank you for the information. So, they're going to sell it to everybody else, to somebody else. So if you're going to sell it to somebody else, then you're going to wind up lifnei iver again, right? It's just lifnei iver, but you're just a step removed. So the answer is umakatri, and they're going to wind up burning it as incense. So Amar Abai says alifnei mipakdinon, alifnei dilifnei lo mifakdinon. The pasuk says lifnei iver lo zitei mechshol. Don't put a stumbling block before a blind person. It doesn't say don't put a stumbling block before somebody who will put a stumbling block before a blind person. So therefore, we only have to go 1 step. You don't have to go 2 steps, which is interesting considering hopefully we'll get to a Gemara later on how we're going to line these 2 statements up. Now that's hitting my head going, well, I don't know. We'll see what you think of the Gemara that's coming up. So, v'tarnago lavan. The next thing is white chicken. A white chicken, white rooster. A white rooster is going to be something that would want to worship. So if the non-Jew says, "I want a white rooster," don't sell it to him because he's going to use it for idolatry, right? The question is, if he just says, "I want a rooster," and you sell him a white one, you don't know that he's using it for idolatry. So Amar Rabbi Yonah, Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Zvid. Rabbi Yonah said, "Rabbi Zera said, Rabbi Zvid." Ve'ika demasni. Some who taught it as Amar Rabbi Yonah, Amar Rabbi Zera. There was just Rabbi Yonah who said the name Rabbi Zera, that Rabbi Zvid was not part of the teaching. So Tarnagol Lemi, if you got a non-Jew just wandering around the shop going, who's got a chicken? Okay, he's not asking for a white chicken. So then Muchalim Korlo Tarnagol Lavan, you can sell him a white chicken. Because if he was looking for a white chicken, he would ask for a white chicken. The fact he's just saying a chicken means he just wants to make some soup. Tarnagol Lavan Lemi, but if he says who's got a white rooster, right? Well, if somebody says, who's got a white rooster? So, Asr Lim Korlo, Tarnagol Lavan. You can't sell it to him because he's specifically looking for it. Clearly, he's going to be using it for white rooster purposes. Tanan. Now, our Mishnah said, that Rabbi Yehuda had said, Mocher hu lo tarnegol lovan bein ha tarnegolin. Right? Rabbi Yehuda had said, when you can sell a white rooster, if you're selling it as part of a package deal, right? The guy looks for 10 roosters and you throw in a couple of white roosters in it. That's when it's okay. So now the Gemara wants to know, hey chidami, what is the circumstance in which you're allowed to do that? If the guy's wandering around going, hey, who's got some white chickens? Who's got some white chickens? And now you're going to sell chickens, white rooster. Who's got a white rooster? Who's got a white rooster? Right? Then you're going to throw in some white roosters into your bundle. So that would be afilu beina tarnegolin namilo. It should be prohibited to sell him that white rooster amongst the other roosters as well. Because direct. That's pretty direct. It seems to be clearly what he's looking for. El alav de ka'amar tarnegolimi. Tarnegolimi. It must be that even though he's saying who's got a rooster, and he's not specifying, va'afilu hachi, and what we're saying is even under those circumstances, the Rabbi Yehuda, beina tarnegolin in, you're only allowed to sell that white rooster as part of a package deal, bifnei atzmo lo, but not by itself. So that, with Tanakama, and the Tanakama says, "Afilu beinar tarnegol and namilo." You can't even sell it as part of a package deal. So that is not what Rabbi Yonah said in Rabbi Zara, because Rabbi Zara said, if the guy's not looking for a white rooster, then you can sell him a white rooster. Well, according to the Tanakama, you can never sell him a white rooster under any circumstances. And according to the Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, it has to be in a part of a package. So how are we going to understand this? So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains, what are we dealing with here? Kagon to Amar, zeh v'zeh. The answer is the guy saying, I'd like some assortment of roosters. Some chickens, I'm going to keep doing that. I'd like an assorted rooster. I'd like your finest rooster assortment, please. Right? The rooster assortment package, right? So that's where the argument is, right? So that's where Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama disagree. If he's asking for an assortment of roosters, is it because he really doesn't care? Or is it because he wants some white roosters because he's going to use the white roosters for the Avodah Zara? So therefore, that's where the argument is.
But according to this, Rabbi Yonah or Rabbi Zara,
yes,
is that talking about a single?
That would be the single rooster, right? That's the circumstance of the single rooster, right? If he's not specifying anything, he just says who's got a rooster, then you can sell him the single rooster. And that's what we're trying to say is that's not the case the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is talking about a case where the person says, I'd like an assortment of roosters. Then comes the question, if you would like an assortment of roosters, do we have to still avoid giving him a white rooster anyway?
Right, and it sounds like those two opinions, neither of them would be happy with a single rooster.
Those two opinions, actually, no, it would come out the other way then, right? Then it would come out that if it was just a single rooster, as long as he doesn't ask for a white one, then it's okay. The problem that we have is that he's asking for an assortment, or he wants this and this. He wants both a white one and give me an assortment of roosters. Make sure there's at least one white one in there. But that's the challenge.
The white one, right?
Well, the issue is, can you include the white one, right? The Tanakhama says you can't include the white one, and the Rabbi Yehuda says you can include the white one.
Well, the one was used for Avodah Zara?
That's the white ones can be used for Avodah Zara. That's right. So Tanya Nami Hachli for Bryce that supports this as well. That Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Emasai, when is this allowed? Bisman Amar Tarnagol Zel Lavan, right? When is it that he says, if he says, I want this white rooster, right? Then you can't sell it to him. Aval im Amar Zeh v'zeh, but here it specifies it clearly. If he says, I'd like a white rooster and I'd like regular other colored roosters, so then mutter, then that's okay. Ve'afilu Amar Tarnagol Zeh ove kochavim, and even if he's going to say this rooster is going to be used for idolatry, she'asa mishtel libno, that he's making a party for his son, o shehaya lo chola betoch beiso. So even if he says it's going to be for Avodah Zara, if he's making a party for his son or he has a sick person in his house, then it's mutter, then it's allowed. Because he's really not going to we're going to see that he's not using it for idolatry. We're going to try to figure out why is he asking for a white rooster, telling everybody it's for idolatry, and then we're going to presume he doesn't mean it. And the answer is because there clearly is another use he has this rooster in mind.
Maybe the only reason why he said adultery, just to confuse them, just to convince them to buy it, sell it to them.
Sorry?
Maybe the reason why he said for adultery is so you can convince him to sell to him.
So you're ahead of us. That's good. So ve'hatnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Ove kochavim shasa mishnah libno, Eino Aser elo oso hayom v'oso ish bilvad. 1 second. We learned in a Mishnah earlier, the exact opposite. Right before we even get into the white rooster, we weren't allowed to sell anything to a guy who's making a feast for his son. Right? We weren't allowed to sell anything a Mishnah ago. So, and for oso hayom for that day, v'oso ish for that person. Right, so for that person, but oso hayom v'oso ish miha aser. For that person and that day, it's prohibited to sell him anything. Forget white roosters or anything. You can't sell him anything. So Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Mesharshia betavzig. So the answer of Yitzchak bar Rav Mesharshia is explaining that it's not a wedding feast. Wedding feasts, you're right. Wedding feasts, they would serve their Avodah Zara and they would thank their Avodah Zara. This is just a social feast. So clearly, the guy is trying to buy a rooster for the sake of a meal. He's just telling everybody that it's going to be for Avodah Zara. We'll see that Yehuda is right, that the issue is, well, we'll see in a moment, why would he say that it's for Avodah Zara? He's not doing that. And the answer is, because he is a fundamentalist idol worshiper, and he figures that if he tells people I'm using it for idolatry, they're going to give him the best rooster that he can get. Everybody thinks like me, right? Everybody loves Avodah Zara, so therefore, if I want the best rooster, I just go around saying, you know what? Give me the rooster for Avodah Zara. Give me the best one. He's not, but we know he's not going to use it for Avodah Zara because he's got a sick person in his house. He's making chicken soup. He's got a feast for a son coming up, which is not going to be an Avodah Zara feast, and he's going to use it for that. So if we know that he's not going to use it for Avodah Zara, then you could even sell him if he says zeh v'zeh.
Basically, the feast is to help cure his son from his sickness or whatever.
That's right. Right? So that's why even if he says that this tarnigal is for Avodah Zara, as long as we have rational reason to believe that he's not going to do it, it's okay. Tanan. Now, we learned in the Mishnah. Ushar kol dvarim staman muter uperushan aser. Our Mishnah, the end of our Mishnah says that any other item, right, if you just merely state the item, so then you can, the guy walks into the store and says, we're going to see what it means. We're going to say, he just says, I'd like some nails, right? No problem. If he comes in and he specifies, I'd like 3-inch nails that are used for wood, for decking or something, then maybe that's not allowed. So you see, a stam versus a explanation. So how are we understanding this? So my stam and my perushon is what I just explained. Is that really what it means? Stam just means he just walks in and asks for the general item, and the explanation is the specific item. So maybe it means that when we say stama, he really does specify in detail what it exactly is he wants. He wants white wheat kernels, right? The best bleached wheat. So then that's the plain request. Perushon, and if he specifies, that's where he says to come lavodas kachavim. He says, I want to use it for idolatry, right? Give me the best white wheat kernels, can use it for idolatry. So then that's where you can't sell it low. That's where you can't lo staman tzricha lememer de mezabninon, velo perushon tzricha lememer de lo mezabninon. Then the whole last line of Mishnah is completely superfluous because obviously, if the guy walks in the store and says, can I have some wheat? You can sell it to him. Obviously, if the guy walks in and says, can I have some white wheat to serve Avodah Zara with? You can't sell it to him. Why do I need the Mishnah to say, hey, if he specifies that it's for Avodah Zara, you're not allowed to sell it to him? That seems extra. Ella, so rather, staman de kamar chiti. So maybe it's like I said at first, that the general order is where he says, can I have some wheat? Perushan de kamar chivarta. And the specific one is where he says, can I have some bleached wheat? Miklal. So that means that if that's the case, that since he's coming in, he's asking for a specific product, we're supposed to anticipate, why is he asking for the specific best quality? Because he plans to use it as a sacrifice for idolatry. That's what we're going to presume about an idolater, is that when he walks into the store and he says he wants wheat, that's when he's going to make some bread. But if he walks into the store and he says, I'd like your best white wheat, that's when he's going to serve Avodah Zara. Well, if that's true, miklal de tarnagol, when it comes to the rooster, afilu staman nami lo. Right, that when it would come to a rooster, right? Even, have to be careful. We're good.
Yeah, we're still good.
Okay, good, excellent. That's correct. No, it's good. Okay, afilu staman namilo. Even if he doesn't specify whether he wants a white rooster or another rooster. It just comes in and says, "Can I have a rooster, please?" That would be you couldn't sell him that one either, right? Even if he doesn't specify. Right? So, but that we said is not the case, because if he walks in and says, can I have a rooster? We said that's okay to sell him. It's only if he says a white one that you couldn't. So, liolam, so that's not the case. So rather, we're going to go back and we're going to say, staman de ka'amar chiti chivarta, the regular Stam is the situation where he walks into the store and he says, I'd like your best white wheat, and Perushon de Kamer Lavodas Kochavim. And he can, and when he's explaining what he wants, and he says it's for Avodah Zara, so that is when he explains that he wants for Avodah Zara, and that is not allowed to sell to him.
And this person is not Jewish, right?
He's not Jewish. Yeah, he's a Ovid Avodah Zara. It doesn't specify. Theoretically, if you had a Jewish person who worshipped Avodah Zara, you couldn't sell it to him either, right?
Unless it's a rooster, like we just said in the previous example.
So in the rooster, if he comes in and he said, we did say the rooster that you could sell him, right? So, we said the rooster we could only under the circumstance where we know he has another use for the rooster. That was why, right? Right here, we don't necessarily have another use. He comes in and he says, I'm going to use it for Avodah Zara. Then you're right. If we know that he's making bread for, the bake sale, right? So then, okay, maybe then it's okay, right? That would be parallel. The reason why when it came to the rooster that we could sell is because he had an event for his son, or he had something else that was coming. We knew he's going to use the rooster not for Avodah Zara. He's only saying it in order to get the best one. So, now, why would we, and now we're trying to explain, we sort of explained it already, but now we'll explain. Why is it that if he says, I'm going to use it for Avodah Zara, we need to say that you can't sell it to him? That should be obvious. If he says it's for Avodah Zara, it should be not allowed. Because Salka Daita Chamina, I would have thought to have said, Hai Gavra Lav Lavros Kochavim Kaboy. He's not using it for Avodah Zara. That's not his intention. Ella Mibaku de Ovik Bavodas Kochavim. He's just a real big zealot. He loves his Avodah Zara. And so therefore, Vesavar, Kiechidahu Gavra Ovik Be, Kuliyamanami Aviku. This is the way people think, right? I look at the world through the lens that I see the world in. Since I go around thinking that Avodah Zara. Okay, good. We're going to double check. Just so that everybody knows, we lose power, then we might lose this year. So Mirza Hashem we'll be okay. So now, so he figures that just like I love my Avodah Zara, so too everybody loves the Avodah Zara. So therefore, if I want to get Ema Hachi, so I'm going to say, give me the best stuff because I'm using it for Avodah Zara, so that he'll give me the best quality stuff. Kamash Mohan, no. That you can't presume that. If the guy walks in and says, I'm using it for Avodah Zara, believe him, right? Except the case of the rooster that we had before, because in the case of the rooster, we had a reason to believe that he was not actually using it for Avodah Zara. Boy, Ravashi. Ravashi wants to know. Okay, we get this idea about asking for white chickens, asking for groups of chickens, asking for a non-white chicken. Keep saying it. Roosters, boy, Ravashi. Right, there's an old joke, right? So if you have a house in the southern hemisphere, which on the and you have a rooster that's standing on the top of the roof, which side do the eggs go down? And the answer is roosters don't lay eggs. But my roosters do, apparently, because my roosters are chickens. Boy, Ravashi. Ravashi asks the following question. Tarnagol Lovon Katua Lemi. Let's say this non-Jew is walking around going, hey, who's got a dismembered white rooster, right? Now, he's asking for a dismembered one. As we said, that if it's missing any limbs, then they're not going to use it for Avodah Zara. He's asking for a white rooster, but it's dismembered, so it can't be for Avodah Zara. So now what? Mahulim korlo tarnagol lovon sholim. Can you decide, I don't have a dismembered one, but I've got a regular white rooster, I almost said chicken, a regular white rooster. Can I sell him a regular white rooster now? Because I know he's not going to use it for Avodah Zara because he's asking for a dismembered one.
I would say no.
Mi amrinon, do we say mi dikamar katua lav lavudus kachav kabai? That since he's saying that he wants one that's missing a limb, means he doesn't want it for Avodah Zara. Oh, Dilmor, perhaps, Yerume Kamarim, he's making a trick. He knows that people don't have a lot of dismembered roosters in their stock. So if he was running around, he knows the Jews are not going to sell it to him. So therefore, he runs around saying, who's got a dismembered one, knowing that somebody's going to say, I got a regular one, because that's at least no worse, right? If you're looking for a dismembered one, you can have a whole one. So, Tim Silomar, Hi Yerume Huda Kamarim. And if we're going to say that he's just playing a fast one, he's trying to pull a fast one, trying to go love on Lemi. So let's say he says, who's got a white rooster? Who's got a white rooster? V'yavule shachor v'shakol. And the guy doesn't have a white rooster, so he sells him a black one. And he goes, okay, thanks. And he buys it. Okay. V'yavule edom. Next week he comes in, who's got a white one? And he goes, I don't have a white one, but I got a red one. So he gives him a red one. V'shakol, and he takes that one. Ma'ulim korlo love one. The next week he comes in, can you sell him a white one? Because clearly he doesn't mind that it's black or red. So it can't be for Avodah Zara. He's coming in, he's asking for white ones. That's ideal. But if I say, you know what, I'm all out of the white ones, and I sell you a black one and he buys it, and I'm selling you a red one and he buys it, it's not for Avodah Zara. Mi amrion came into Yahavu shakel v'shakel edom v'shakel. Do we say, I gave him a black one and he took it. I gave him a red one and he took it. Lav lavodos kachavim kaboy. He's not using it for Avodah Zara. Oh, Dilmar, perhaps. Yerumi kamarim. This is just a trick, right? He buys the red one, he buys the black one, right? So you sell him the white one another time, exactly. So, Teku. We don't have an answer to that, right? Those are good questions. We're trying to get into the mind of the opposition, and that is a difficult place to be, right? So we don't know exactly what he's thinking. So we usually say, avoid it, right? Safek derabot, safek deraisa. We're going to avoid the lifnei iver problem and not sell it to him. That would be the halacha. So, Rabbi Meir says, af dekel. The next thing is he says also the dates, good date tree. Well, you assume it's a date tree, but it's not a date tree. Amarli Rav Chisda la'avimi. So Rav Chisda said to Avimi, Gemiri da'avodos kachavim da'avram Avinu dalad mea pirki havyon. You know, when Avram Avinu used to learn Maseches Avodah Zara, it had 400 prakim in it. Very long Masechta. So whatever that means, is a good question, right? They didn't have the Gemaras back then, but you had Yeshiva Shem Ve'averts, they were learning something, right? They had a lot to talk about Avodah Zara, because that back then, there was a lot of Avodah Zara in the world. So Maseches Avodah Zara, for them, they learned in detail what are all the Avodah Zaras, what was the...
Especially his father.
Yeah, that's correct. So Avram Avinu, that's probably why they pick Avram Avinu, right? Because he's an extra. At the time when there was a ton of Avodah Zara, they had 400 prakim. The Anan Chamisha. Us, we've got 5 prakim. We've got 5 prakim in Avodah Zara. But Tanan, V'lo Yadinan, my Kamrinam. But we've got a Mishnah and I don't understand what it's talking about. Even with only 5 prakim, I can't figure out what it's talking about. So, how's what's going on? My kasha, what was bothering him that he didn't understand? Dekatani, our Mishnah said, Rabbi Meir says, Af dekel tav, chatzav, v'niklas. Right? What is this good date tree, and a chatzav and a niklas, which we don't know what those things are. So, also limkar le'ovdei kochavim. So you're not allowed to sell that to a non-Jew, to an ovei kochavim. Now, dekel tavhu delo mezavninon, that means that you can't sell him a good palm tree, but that means ha dekel bish mezavninon. That would mean that if it's a bad palm tree, you could sell him. Now, the problem with selling a non-Jew a palm tree is a secondary issue having nothing to do with Avodah Zara. And that is V'hatnan, we learned in a Mishnah. And this Mishnah is in, not our Masechta, right? Mishnah later on. Your test Ahmed Beis, Mishnah later on. V'hatnan, we're in a Mishnah. Ein mocherin lahem b'mechubar lakarka. You're not allowed to sell anything that's attached to the ground. Because if you sell him something that's attached to the ground in Eretz Yisrael, so then non-Jews start owning pieces of Eretz Yisrael, and we don't want them to have permanent ownership of Eretz Yisrael.
What attached to the ground? Could they use that for Zara at the same time?
Well, they're not going to worship the ground, right? They're not necessarily, they could, but that isn't the issue. The issue that we have is that we're not going to want them to own land in Eretz Yisrael. So we don't want to sell them anything that's attached to the ground because the ground comes with it, right? Because the ground is sustaining the item. So you tell them a palm tree of any sort, and the palm tree is now connected to the ground becomes his. So you don't want to sell that to a non-Jew, whether it's good or it's bad. So how are we supposed to explain our Mishnah, which says that you have to avoid selling him good ones? So Amar Le, so he said back to him, my dekel tov, you know what it means by a good palm tree here? Peiros dekel tov. It's the fruit from a good palm tree. It's the dates, right? It's not a palm tree itself. V'chein Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said the same thing. Peiros dekel tov. It's the fruit from a good palm tree. What is a chatzav? Chatzav is kashba. Chatzav is kashba, which is another type of nice dates that they had, I believe, right? It's another date type. And then niklas. So what are niklas? Ki asa Rav Dimi, Amar Rav Chama Bar Yosef. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said to Rav Chama Bar Yosef, koraiti. These are koraiti dates. Okay?
What are koraiti dates?
Great question. Abayi wants to know the same thing. Amar le Abayi, the Rav Dimi. Abayi says the Rav Dimi. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, niklas, the niklas dates, velo yad inon mahu, we have no idea what they are. V'ata mart koraiti, and now you tell me they're koraiti dates. Velo yad inon mai, velo yadinon, and I don't know what that means. So my ahonislan, how did you help me? Right? You translated the word by telling me another word that I also don't know what that means. So Amar Lei, so Rav Dimi said to him, Ahanai luchu, I'll tell you how I helped you. Dechi azlas hasam, when you go on a trip to Eretz Yisrael, Amart lahu, you go to the store and you'll say Niklas, and you'll ask for Niklas, and velo yadi, and nobody will know what you're talking about because nobody sells Niklas in Eretz Yisrael. Amart lehu koraiti, but if you walk into the store in Eretz Yisrael and you say, "Can I have koraiti?" The yadi, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. V'kamak lehu lach, and they'll show you what you're talking about. Right? That's how it helps.
It's helpful,
right?
Yeah.
You don't know what it is, but
Right.
the storekeepers in Eretz Yisrael know what it is, so you'll find it. That's right. At least you know where to find it. Says the Mishnah. Mokum shenagu limkor behema dakol of dekachavim mochrim. And we don't have to explain that much of this Mishnah because the Gemara is going to do a good job going through all of the explanations of it. If they have a custom to sell small animals, literally thin animals, these are small, the goats, the sheeps, to non-Jews, so then we can sell them. But malkum shenagu shalolim kor ein mokrin. But if it's a place where you don't sell, you don't. And the reason behind it, essentially, is, even we're not going to explain what the Gemara is going to, is that we were worried in some locations that some of the non-Jews had the practice of having relations with their animals. So therefore, it depends, right, where you live, what kind of neighborhood you're in.
This kind of sounds like another masach we did.
It does, yes. We spend a lot of time on that issue, right? At one point in Masechah Sanhedrin, when we were talking about the Misa penalty for that, right? We discussed that. So now, ubechol makom ein mochron lehem behema gasa, but you're never allowed to sell them a large animal. That we're going to discuss in the Gemara. Why is that you can't sell them a large animal? Agolim v'sayachim, calves and foals, right? Even though they're small, but they're going to grow to become big. Shleimin ushvurin. It doesn't matter whether they're healthy or whether they're a little bit ill or sick, right? Rabbi Yehuda matir, so then you're not allowed to sell them either. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shvura. Excuse me. Rabbi Yehuda's matir b'shvura. Rabbi Yehuda says that a broken down animal is okay, that you're allowed to use. Uben Beseira matir b'sus, and Ben Beseira says horses are also okay. And we had discussed the horses a little bit in the past because they're not farm animals, but we'll discuss why that makes a difference. Says the Gemara, L'meimra de surah leka minhaga hu deika. So let's talk about these small animals. It sounds like there's no real prohibition against selling the animal, right? And the Torah doesn't say don't sell these animals to the non-Jews. It's all dependent on what the custom is, right? If you're in a place that you don't sell it, so don't sell it. If you're then you do. Heicha denahig aser nahig, heicha denahig heter nahig, right? Whatever the custom is, if they sell it here, sell it. If they don't sell it here, then don't sell it. Or a minhi, but we have a contradiction to that. It says ein ma'amidin behema bepundekos shel ovdei kochavim. You're not allowed to stable your animals in the inns of the non-Jews. I guess they would have stables, right, where they would watch your animal and take care of them, right? You're not allowed to leave them in a non-Jewish stable, because we're worried about them having relations with the animals. So you can't leave your animal with them because lifneiver, right? It's a lifneiver problem that they might do an avera with your animal. So Amar Rav, Rav says, Makom shehitiru limkor hitiru liyached. So Rav explains that's the whole point, right? A place that they said you're allowed to sell it, hitiru liyached, that it was also permissible for you to leave your animal with the non-Jew. That was basically, some non-Jews did that, some non-Jews did not. Malkum she'asur liyached, the place they said that you have to worry about the non-Jew doing that, so then asur limkor, they said you're not allowed to sell it as well. Tesvav Amid Aleph.
Which is tomorrow's stuff.
Which is tomorrow's daf, yes, but now it's today's. Rabbi Yezer says, Af b'makom she'asur liyached muter limkor. Rabbi Yezer says, no, I disagree with you. Even when you couldn't leave your animal with the non-Jew in their stables, you still are allowed to sell my taima. Why is that? Because ovei kochavim chas al behemto shelo te'aker. Because a non-Jew might not have relations with his own animal because he might injure it, right? And they might sterilize the animal, so he doesn't want to do that. But if it's your animal, he doesn't care. So therefore, even if you were allowed to sell, even in those places where you're allowed to sell, it's still universally prohibited to leave your animal with the non-Jew. Va'af Rav Hadar Bey. Even Rav changed his mind and went back. So he decided, you're right. You can't. It's universal. You can't leave your animals with the non-Jew, and you even in places where you can sell it. De Amar Rav Tachlifa, Amar Rav Shila Bar Avimi, Mishmei de Rav, because Rav Tachlifa said in Rav Shila Bar Avimi, in the name of Rav, Ovei Kochavim Chas Al Behemto Shalot Aker. And Ovei Kochavim is worried about hurting his own animal, so therefore you can sell him an animal potentially, and then there are certain places that they were so bad that you wouldn't even sell the animal to them. Okay, so that's what
injury or
the non-Jews, right? They were not good people. They did some bad things, right? Now we said that in any circumstance you are not allowed to sell a large animal. Now, why is large animal any different? It has nothing to do with having relations with the animal. It's a different problem. My taima. So what's the reason? We're not worried about them having relations with the animal. Mavid be malacha chayshinon. So we're worried that you'll sell the animal to a non-Jew, and then he'll do work with it on Shabbos because they'll plow, right? They'll plow the field with the animal, and that's going to be a problem, right?
But the animal's now owned.
Amazing. So that's the Gemara's question. V'niave, let him work it. What's the problem? Work it. Kevin dezavna kanye. Once he sold the animal, the non-Jew owns it, right? There's only a prohibition of your animal not working on Shabbos. Once you sold the animal, why is that a problem? So the answer is good point. Good point. Gzeira mishum she'ela u'mishum schirus. We're worried that if I let you sell the animal to the non-Jew, you might also lend the animal to the non-Jew, or you might rent the animal to the non-Jew. So we just said, we've had this before, right? No doing business.
If you rent the animal to a non-Jew, the non-Jew could worship it.
Worshipping, we're not worried about. We're worried about him working it on Shabbos.
Okay. Plowing or whatever it needs.
For plowing, that's correct, on Shabbos. So now, problem is, she'ela kanye v'agra kanye. Even if he borrows it, doesn't the non-Jew own it when he borrows it? Isn't he the one who has rights to use it? Also, if he rents it, doesn't he own it? Isn't that his right to use it the way he wants? Why is the work restriction on an animal that belongs to you if it's under loan or rent to a non-Jew?
Could you just tell me you're allowed to borrow it on these conditions?
You could do that, but can you trust him? Right? Okay, well, you're a mashgiach, right? Yeah. Would you be able to tell the restaurant you can open your restaurant, and I'm not going to be here on Shabbos because I'm going to be busy, but you can open your restaurant on Shabbos under these conditions, and that will be okay?
No, because it will be on COR, it will be kosher.
That's correct. So this is the same thing, right? You can't trust them to not do that.
Right. Are we saying that when you lend something to somebody, if they use it on Shabbos, it's in their rishus?
Yes. So it's not if you're bothered by that, that's okay, because the Gemara is going to be bothered by that later. But the Gemara at this stage accepts that as a fair question, fair point, right? You're right? Once you rent something to somebody or you lend them it, then it's under their control. It's not your responsibility to make sure it doesn't work. Now, the fact that you don't like that, that's okay, because the Gemara is going to question that premise later on. But at this point, the Gemara says, okay, we're going to come up with a different answer. And that is, El Amar Rami Breder Rav Yeva. Rami, the son of Rav Yeva, says, Gzeira Mishum Nisyune. The issue is testing the animal. The Jew wants to sell the animal, right? So what happens? He goes to the non-Jew, and the non-Jew says, can I take a test drive? I'd like to know how good this animal can carry a burden, right? So, what's going to happen is it's going to be close to Friday afternoon. One time, could be close to Friday afternoon. Demali Shabso, it's right on Friday, right? Or Shabbos, right close to Shkia. Famerle ton nasye niale. So, what's going to happen is he's going to have this load. He's going to be showing the non-Jew the load, and then he's going to say, "Okay, let's test it out. Come on, let's test it out." Visham ole likole. The animal is going to hear the voice of its previous owner, the Jew, right? Ve'azla machmasei, and the animal will respond to the voice, right? The animals respond to voices, right? You tell your dog, "Come here," right? The dog comes, right? So if your animal responds, you say to your ox, "Come here," and the ox is carrying a burden, and it's Shabbos, and the ox walks, that's you, right? That's you getting it. That's you getting the animal to carry on Shabbos for your benefit. Now, how's it for your benefit? V'nichale detezo. It's good for him that he wants the animal to walk because why? Because then the non-Jew gets to see that it's a good animal. So he likes. It shows the animal's well trained. The animal listens. The animal carries. It's a good animal. So v'havalei mechamer acher behemto b'Shabbos. Therefore, it's like somebody who is trying to encourage his animal to plow on Shabbos. He's going after it and he's going, yeah, yeah. That's why the animals, I guess, I've never seen cowboys, they do that, right? They yell at the animal.
The whip.
The whip, but I'm saying even the voice, right? Even the whip, they'll run from the whip. But even by voice command, you can get your animal to move. If you do that, if you make your animal go and do a malach on Shabbos, this is your own animal, remember, and you haven't sold the animal yet. Right. You're just testing it, so you're in the test drive phase. If you make your animal go on Shabbos, you're chayav chatos. That's a doraisa, right? Maskif la Rav Shisha braid Rav Idi. So this is where Rav Shisha braid Rav Idi asks the question that we had just been talking about. Schiras mikanya. When somebody rents an animal, they don't own it, right? We had presumed before that the non-Jew, if you rent the animal, that wasn't an answer because the non-Jew now owns the animal when he rents it. Is that really true? Right? V'atnan, we had a Mishnah. Mishnah says, Af b'makom she'amru lahaskir lo lebeis dira. We said that when you're allowed to, let's say you're allowed to rent a house to a non-Jew. Amru mipnei shemachnis letocho avodos kochavim. Right? You're not allowed to rent him. You're not allowed to rent him a living house, right? You can, even a place where you said you're going to rent a non-Jew a property, that you can rent him an office. Can't rent him a place to live. Why? Because a place to live, he brings his Avodah Zara in. So you're renting your house to him, and he's going to bring Avodah Zara in. Now, if it's true that what we were saying before is correct, renting means he owns it. So haiki kamayil levesei, kamayil. So he said, "Hi, Kamal." They say he's bringing the Avodah Zarah to his own house. What's the problem? Why is that an issue? So clearly, the fact is that it is an issue, and since it's an issue, it shows that when you rent something, you still are the owner. So that's why it is a problem, isn't it? It's a problem that the non-Jew would use your animal if you rented it. So the answer is no. Kama'ayil shani. Avodas kochavim dechamira. He says, well, if he's bringing Avodah Zarah into the house, that's different because Avodah Zarah is a very strict prohibition, a much, much stricter situation. Dichsev, because the pasuk specific says, "Velo tavi toeva el beisachu," you're not allowed to bring an abomination into your house. So even though under normal circumstances we would say a rental is the other person's property, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, we're stricter. So you can't even have a rental agreement where he brings Avodah Zarah into the house. Okay, Maskif Rav Yitzchak Brei de Rav Mesharshia. So Rav Yitzchak Brei de Rav Mesharshia still doesn't like it. Still doesn't like the idea that schirus means a complete transfer of ownership. We're still not thrilled with it. Schirus mikanya, who says that schirus, the rental, is a transfer of ownership. That's not we learned in Mishnah.
Schirus means
a rental. Yeah, schirus is a rental. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah. Yisrael shesachar para mikohen. Let's say a Jew rents a cow from a kohen. Yachlena karshine truma. He could feed a truma. Now, whose animal is it?
The Kohen's.
The Kohen's animal. But the Jew is the one who's renting it. So don't we say that the person who's renting it is now the owner? Clearly not, right?
You can't give a Kohen's animal truma. It's not to the Kohen.
Kohen's animal, and a Kohen can eat truma and all his entire household and his animals and everything in it. Yeah. Now, the Kohen, similar the other way around. Kohen shesachar param Yisrael. If a Kohen rents a cow from a regular Yisrael, even though he's responsible for feeding it, he cannot feed it. Karshin is vetch, which is some kind of low-growing, quick-growing weed they would use for animal food, right? So you can't use that for truma. You can't use truma vetch because it's not yours. So clearly, if what we were saying earlier is true, that schirus, that rental means that you're actually transferring ownership temporarily to the other person. Why can't he feed the cow the truma vetch? D-day, it's his. It's the cow, it's the Kohen's for the time being. El Shmami, no, you can see clearly from that Mishnah, Schiras lo kanya. Schiras does not change the ownership. Hence, therefore, let's go back. V'hasha dinamart Schiras lo kanya. Now that we have come to the conclusion, right, that what we said before is not true. So now, what is the reason why you can't sell a large animal to a non-Jew? It's because of all three of these things. You can't sell it because you might rent it Can't sell it because he might borrow it, which are problems because it's still your animal. And you can't also sell it because you'll do the test drive on Erev Shabbos. So all of those are good reasons, and that's why they never allowed the sale of a large animal to a non-Jew. Okay, good. Rav Ada Shara Lizvuni Chamra Ida de Saf Sira. So Rav Ada was permitted a Jew to sell a donkey to a non-Jew through a reseller, right? He had, I guess, the donkey exchange, right? The donkey exchange. So he had it was not a broker. That's what it was. It's a broker, right? It's not really an exchange. He didn't sell it to another person. He sold it to the other person. Right. He hired a broker, right? He hired a
He
broker.
was also Jewish.
So yeah, he was Jewish, and that was okay. He could he could sell the donkey to a non-Jew through the broker, right? Even though he couldn't sell the donkey to a non-Jew directly, he could sell it through the broker.
Why is that allowed if you can't sell it directly?
Because if you're worried about the test drive, halo yoda likale de ozla machmaseh. Well, the broker isn't the animal's real owner. Hence, what were you worried about? That the owner was going to scream and whatever, was going to call the animal and the animal would follow? Well, the animal doesn't know the broker. So therefore, if the broker calls the animal's not coming. So therefore, the broker, there's no way for the broker to make that mistake and to get the animal to work. V'imishum she'ela uschirus. If you're worried about him lending the animal out or renting the animal out, kevan delo didehi, it's not even the broker's animal. So lo moshil v'lo moger, he can't rent it. He can't. He's a broker. He has no right to rent it or to lend it out, right? Ve'od, and furthermore, mishum delo nigle beit muma, he wouldn't do it in any event because that's bad sales technique. He doesn't want to give you that much of a close look at the item that he's selling because you might not like it. So he keeps the product close, right? So he would never rent it. So therefore, the whole gezerah goes away. There's no concern if you use a broker. Rav Huna zovinahi para le'ove kochavim. Rav Huna sold a cow to a non-Jew. Amar le Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, "My time ovid marhachi. Why did you do that?" So Amar le, he said to him, "Amor lishchita zavna," because he might be using it for slaughtering. He might be eating it. That's why I did it. Imina temra damrini ki gavna. So who says that you can do that? Who says that you can presume that the guy looked hungry and therefore?
You looked in an earlier Mishnah or whatever. He's not allowed to do it.
So this is the issue, right? He said you're not allowed to do that. How do you know that if you think that he's going to use it for eating, that it's acceptable? It's not. We learned it in another Mishnah. Beis Shammai says, Lo yimkor adam para hachoreshes b'shvius. Right? Beis Shammai says, you're not allowed to sell a plowing cow during the Shemitah year. Because what's the guy going to use it for? Right? He's going to use it to plow. And that's aser. Well, Beis Hill matir, and Beis Hill says it's fine because he can eat it. So therefore there's a permissible use. So you see that you could sell it to the non-Jew. He might use it for Avodah Zara. He's probably not going to because he could eat it. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, "Mi dami halsam." Is that similar? That's the case over there. Ein adam mitzuva al shvisas behemto bashvias. There, a person has no commandment. There's no mitzvah on him to prevent his animal from working for somebody else during Shemitah. He can't plow his field on Shemitah with his cow, right? But there's no mitzvah like on Shabbos or Avodah Zarah to stop your animal from being used for that. Hacha, but here, al mitzvah al shvisas b'amto b'Shabbos, here, he has to be worried that if he sells it to the non-Jew, right, or lends it to the non-Jew or whatever it is, he could use it on Shabbos. So therefore, he has no right to sell it as the gezerah. So Amarle Abai says, "V'kol heichadana mitzuva aser." What are you telling me? Wherever there's a prohibition, if you're telling me that wherever there's a requirement to prevent your item from being used, that means that you're not allowed to sell that item to a non-Jew or to somebody else who could use it, violate the prohibition. V'arei sadeh. What about a field? Dada mitzuva al shvisa sadeh b'shvias. A field. Person is commanded that his field should not be worked on Shemitah year. Utnan, the Mishnah says, Beis Shammai says, Lo yimkor adam sadeh nir b'shvius. You're not allowed to sell your plowed field during the Shemitah year. Ubeis Hill matirin, and Beis Hill says you can. now. Why would you buy it? You can't use it for anything. Why? Because he might not use it. So now, so therefore, even though he's commanded to not allow his field to be used, right? He can't lend it to somebody else for them to grow something in. So therefore, we should say that the prohibition applies that he can't sell it either. The gzeira should apply. So maskif le Rav Ashi is v'chol. Huh?
Why would somebody buy it to not use it?
Oh, so the answer, which we'll jump ahead because you're asking the question at this point. The answer is because it's available in the market, right? Fields are not always available. So therefore, why would I buy it if I'm just going to let it sit? Because if I wait a year, somebody else is going to buy it. So even though I don't plan to use it now, since I plan to use it at some point, I'm not going to let the opportunity pass me by.
Are you allowed to buy fields from the Shemitah year? Is another question.
So buy the field you can, right? Work the field I can't, right? If the property next door to Viewmount School, right, came up for sale, it doesn't matter if we have no plan on how we're going to expand the school. We're buying it, right? Mm-hmm. We'll figure out how we're going to expand afterwards because it's available. It's not going to come up if I don't buy it now. It might not be available for another 25 years. So therefore, it's available. I get it. That's why, right? So that's Beis Hillel's point. But you should be not allowed to buy it based on the presumption that there's a gzeira against selling something that I'm prohibited from allowing somebody else to use it. So. Maskif Rav Ashi asks, what are you saying? That also on the other side, if you're saying that wherever a person is not commanded to let the item rest, you are allowed to sell it. V'harei kelim, what about utensils? A person doesn't have any obligation to make sure that his shovel doesn't do any work on Shemitah year, right? He just can't plow the ground. Utnan, and the Mishnah says, these are utensils that you're not allowed to sell during Shemitah year. Why? Because the one reason you're buying them, and that's to work the field.
To work the land on Shemitah, which is also.
If you use shovels, right? Ha'ol, the yoke, ha'mizareh, ha'deker, a hoe, what is it? Mizareh is, what do you call it?
Shovel.
The mizar is the shovel, so that means the machrisha is the plowing tool, right? The plowing.
The hoe.
The hoe. That's what it is for plowing. Yeah. Okay, so all of those utensils, you can't sell those because what are you buying for? Yeah, but I'm not. If you're the way that you're explaining this is that if I'm commanded to prevent it from being used, then I'm not allowed to sell it. Then how is it that I'm not allowed to sell these items? I'm not commanded to stop them from being used, and how is it that I'm allowed to sell the field even though I am commanded to let that rest? So Elam Rashi says that's not the boundary. The boundary isn't that you thought, right? That wherever I'm commanded to prevent it from being used, that's going to be when the gzeira applies. Rashi says, Kol heichadeka demitla talinon. What happens is whenever there is a rational explanation for what the person might be using it for to permit the sale, that would be acceptable, right? So that is, for example, the land, right? The land, I'm buying it now because if I don't buy it now, then it's not going to be available. So therefore, that could be why I'm buying it. I don't plan to use it. I could be buying it to hold on to it. A shovel, there's absolutely no reason why I could be buying a shovel right now. I can always buy a shovel a year from now. No reason to buy a shovel. So therefore, that's why I can't buy a shovel, but I can sell the land.
This is a great sale going on shovels because they're not really in use.
Yeah, so
it's like buying ice skates in the summer.
Your backup shovel.
Or buying snowboard in the summertime.
That's what I'm saying.
So yeah. V'yavagav de mitzuva. So even if you're told that you're not allowed to use it, kol heicha deleka lemitli, as long as there's nothing to dependent on, right? Lo talinon afagav de mitzuva, right? So you're not allowed to. If he's told to, right, so if there's nothing to, if there's no reason, right, you're commanded, right, if there's no reason why he'd be allowed to use it, right, we're not allowed to. So even though he's not commanded, right, it doesn't make a difference. It's not a matter of whether you're commanded to let it rest or not. That matters. It's a matter of, can you presume that something good is being used for something? And that's why Rav Huna it was acceptable for him to sell that animal because he knew that it was probably being used for food, not for Avodah Zara or for Shabbos. Okay, next. Where did I go? Rabba Zavinahu Chamra Li Yisrael HaChoshad Limkor Lo V'Kochavim. Rabba once sold a donkey to a Jew who was suspected of selling to non-Jews. So Abaye says, "My time of Marhachi. Why did you do that? Why did you sold it to a guy you know what he's going to do with it?" So Amar Le Anna Li Yisrael Zavini. He says, "What did I do wrong? I sold it to a Jew. The problem is selling it to a non-Jew. I didn't sell it to a non-Jew. I know he's going to do the wrong thing. So Amar Le Fa'azil Umizavin Le Lovikachavim. But you know he's going to sell it to a non-Jew. So Lovikachavim Ka Mizavin Li Yisrael Lo Ka Mizavin. Right. So So his answer was, yeah, but it's just like you said. You don't know what he's going to do. If a Jew comes into a store to buy it, he'll sell it to a Jew. Non-Jew walks in the street, he's going to sell it to a non-Jew. I don't know who this guy's going to sell it to. So therefore, I don't know. Why should I presume there's a problem? So Eisvei, so they ask a fine question. Let's say you have a place where they sell the small animals to a kusi. Now, kusim are not the same as other Avodah Zara, because they didn't worship Avodah Zara. The kusim basically followed the written Torah. They kept Shabbos pretty well, and they didn't follow the Rabbanans.
What was the difference between the Kusim and the...
So the story of the Kusim is that they went into a conversion. They converted during the times that when Nebuchadnezzar, when he would conquer a nation, he would take them out of their country and move them away. So what he would took the Jews out of Eretz Yisrael and moved them to other places, into Bavel, to exile them. He took the Kusim and he moved them into Eretz Yisrael to put them there. They were getting attacked by lions in Eretz Yisrael. They had a belief in their religion that there's a God for every country, for every location. And so they figured, why are we getting eaten by lions? We're getting eaten by lions because there's a God in this country and we're not worshiping the right God. So they all converted to Judaism so that they wouldn't get eaten by lions.
So it was like a test for them. Right.
So therefore the question is, were they valid converts or not? Various times through Shas, various points in history, they were considered Jews, and then later on they weren't considered Jews, whether they were serious about converting or they weren't serious about converting. But the bottom line we know is they're certainly way better than other non-Jews, right? They weren't Ovdei Avodah Zara. At the very least, they're non-Jews who are not Ovdei Avodah Zara. Okay, so a place that they had the custom to sell behemoth daka to the kusim mochrin, you could sell v'shalolim kor ein mochrin, but if not, not. Now, my timer, what is the reason for that? If the issue is that we're worried if they're going to have relations with their animals, well, they're not like other non-Jews. We're not worried about that with them. We're going to brisa. You're not allowed to leave an animal in the inns of the non-Jews, even male animals with male animals and female animals with female, shepherds, right? For sure, you can't have a circumstance with the male animals with the female owners and the male owners with the female animals. And you can't give them to the shepherds to have them watch your animals. And you're not allowed to become isolated with them because you have to be concerned that they are going to do they're going to assault. You also can't give your child to a non-Jewish person unsupervised for them to teach your child knowledge or some kind of job.
Because as a Jew, you give your child to a non-Jew.
Because they're choshed for murder, right? They're also choshed for having relations.
They can teach them about Yashka
and they'll also teach them about Yashka and Avodah Zara. So you don't want to do that. Aval, however, when it comes to kusim, the animals in the inns of the that's no problem. You can even give the shepherds to watch. The kusi shepherds can watch your animals. And you could also you don't have to worry about spending time with them, not an issue. You can trust them as teachers as well. The kusim, they're not bad, right? As far as non-Jews go, they're pretty good.
They're basically like Druze, nowadays Druze.
Oh, it's a good question, right? I'm not sure exactly where to put them on the non-Jewish scale, right? But the bottom line is that they were okay. Now, Alma, that brisa clearly says to me, Lo chashti, we're not worried about them having relations with the animals. So if that's the case, why is it that you couldn't sell the animals to them? The Ode, Tanya, we learned another brisa. Ein mochrin lahem lo zayin v'lo kli zayin. You're not allowed to sell to non-Jews weapons or items that help make weapons, right? So sharpening tools or things like that. Vein mashchizim lehem es hazayin. You can't sharpen their weapons. Vein mochrin lehem lo sadon v'lo kol rin v'lo kavolim. You can't sell them collars or stocks, or they had handcuffs, kinds of things, or chains, because they would use that to oppress people. So you don't sell that stuff to the non-Jews. Right? It does not matter whether it's non-Jews or the Kusim. Now, my taima, what's the reason why you couldn't sell that stuff to the Kusim? If you're worried because the Kusim are going to kill somebody, we know they're not. The Kusim are better than that. We said that you could be alone with them. You don't have to worry about them trying to kill you. The answer is, the problem is the Kusim are going to resell it. Right? The Kusim don't keep the rabbinic prohibitions. And it's a rabbinic prohibition not to sell the weapons. So why can't you sell weapons to a Kusi? Because he's going to resell it to a non-Jew. So Kusi lo ovid tshuva, Yisrael ovid tshuva. Maybe the issue is that a Jew, right, will, if he's going to do tshuva,
like repentance,
right? He's the Kusi is never going to do tshuva because he doesn't believe in what the Rabbanan tell him not to do. Right? As far as he's concerned, it's permissible 100%. So he's never the Kusi is not going to do tshuva. Yisrael of it. So the point is, you can't sell it to a Kusi because he might sell it to a non-Jew. So too, you can't sell this animal to a Jew, knowing that he's going to sell it to a non-Jew. That was the point that they were making. So now you're going to say, yeah, but maybe because he's Jewish, he'll do tshuva, and he won't sell it to another non-Jew. You don't know he's going to continue to sell to non-Jews. A Kusi won't change because he believes it's mutter, right? But another Jew, maybe he will. So Yisrael of a tshuva, v'hamar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba, but did Rav Nachman say in Rav Barvua, Keder Shamru Asur Limkor Lovi Kochavim, Kach Asur Limkor Yisrael, Chosher Limkor Lovi Kochavim. That Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav Barvua very clearly that just like it's prohibited to sell directly to a non-Jew, it's also prohibited to sell to a Jew who might himself sell it to a non-Jew. So Rohit Basrei Tlosa Parsi. So he heard that and he ran after the guy he sold it to, the Jewish guy he sold it to, for 3 parsios. Some said it was 1 paras, but it was in sand. So it was very hard work for him to get there. Velo Adarke, but he never caught up to him. So unfortunately, he was never able to fix his error and his mistake. But that was the Rabbah made an error and he was not supposed to sell it. Okay, so that's a good place to stop.